How is technology changing the norms and expectations that citizens have for privacy today?
Well, you know, I want to be clear, and I would like to dispel some myths. Almost every day in the newspaper somewhere you'll see a headline, privacy is dead, privacy is becoming obsolete. With everyone connecting on Facebook, you can't have connecting and privacy. That's nonsense. I want to dispel that myth. I want to start with that because, of course, you can have multiple functionalities operating at the same time, and you must. You know, I'm a psychologist. That's my background, and we are inherently social animals. Very strong desire to connect. We have to connect. There's an equally strong desire for moments of solitude, intimacy, reserve, reflection. You need both. You need privacy and connection, privacy and business interest. So I always tell people, get rid of this zero-sum game. It's one versus the other. Substitute and instead of versus, have a doubly enabling system where you can have privacy and other functionalities. Privacy hasn't disappeared, but it's evolved. It's very contextual. So kids today, they might have a totally different idea of privacy than we do. In fact, there's been research on this from Harvard that says kids go onto Facebook the way we old-timers would have gone to the mall when we were in school. You want to go to be cool. You want to connect with other people. That's why you go on Facebook and you're all connected. Then when you want to have private communications, you go off of Facebook. You text, you do something else. Kids care about privacy. It's different than how you and I may characterize it, but it's all about the individual controlling their information. It's all about control, not secrecy.
Now, as you have these discussions, these are obviously international companies. There are many nations that are involved. How are countries and public officials collaborating on set standards or frameworks for understanding privacy?
So privacy by design last year was unanimously passed as a international standard, a framework for privacy around the world globally by all of the international privacy commissioners and data protection regulators. So that's one thing. But a few years ago, in 2006, I chaired a working group of commissioners where we tried to harmonize all the different, what are called fair information practices and policies and
FIPS.
country. FIPS, very good. You know, because the tech companies were saying to us, give us a break. There's, you know, a Canadian set of FIPS, there's US Safe Harbor, there's the OECD in Europe, there's APEC and over there. You know, there's all these different instruments. Give us one thing. And we did. We harmonized them into one instrument called the Global Privacy Standard, GPS, you know, tongue-in-cheek, GPS, little humor. So you can find that on our website. If you go to privacybydesign.ca, no spaces, all one word, privacybydesign.ca, you'll find the Global Privacy Standard. If you're a new startup and you're thinking, how do I do this? Go to that. And the essence of it is data minimization. Minimize the information you collect from your customers and your users. If you don't need their personal identifiers and their social security number, etc., don't collect it. Because if you don't have the personal identifiers, you don't have the regulatory burden of compliance with legislation because that legislation privacy laws apply to personally identifiable data. If it's not personally identifiable, you do whatever you want with the data. You're free and clear. So, and there are many simple little things you can do like that in terms of embedding privacy proactively into your systems, into your IT, into your business practices. Don't leave it for afterwards to think about and retrofit. Do it right at the front end. It's much cheaper to do it at the front end, and it works much better.
So one of the things I talked to different compliance officers. I've got to be a regulatory reporter in the past, and they talk about this exact issue, data minimization. The Welter data breach laws, therefore worst case scenario is if you lose a laptop that has the data from 50 different states in it, you know, then you've got all these different things you're subject to.
It's huge.
But the standards by which you should be held accountable for these things happen are very important. So how do you weigh harms in the event of a data breach against the benefits of intentional public sharing, such as when someone opts in to share their personal health data, for instance? Where's that tension?
I don't have a problem with that. If the individual user chooses to release their personal data, personal health information, I think that has to be their choice. I always say privacy is about control. So I've had a number of medical procedures. I talk publicly about them because I think it's of benefit to the groups I'm speaking to. That, to me, isn't the issue. The broader issue, regulatory compliance, if you're a hospital, you're a healthcare provider, you have to know what are the privacy laws relating to your information holdings. In your jurisdiction, you have HIPAA. In my jurisdiction, we have PHIPAA. You have to know what the law says. There's no two ways around it. but that doesn't fly in the face of individuals on their own, not as a healthcare organization, but on their own, choosing to share their health information. That's their choice. But you as an organization, you can't make that choice for them. When you think of privacy as fundamentally being about control, and of course regulatory compliance, I'm not suggesting you don't have to worry about that, but when you look at privacy by design, it elevates the bar. It's a higher bar of privacy protection. And what I tell people, including hospitals and organizations, if you follow privacy by design principles, I can virtually guarantee you will be in regulatory compliance with whatever laws are in your jurisdiction, because this raises the bar. I'm expecting more of you by proactively embedding privacy protections. One of them, we say make privacy the default setting. By that I mean automatically privacy is built into the system. An individual doesn't have to think to look at the policy or opt out. They've got privacy built in. It's more of an opt-in kind of system, so it's a harder system to achieve, but it delivers so much more protection.
So, last question. There's been some discussion at different privacy conferences about whether there needs to be a social networking bill of rights, or even to say it, an online privacy bill of rights. Of course, they say, well, in this country we have an existing bill of rights offline. But clearly there are some new issues created by technology that the founders maybe didn't completely think about here. And certainly the founders of Canada have maybe similar stretches of imagination to imagine today. Does there need to be such a thing? Where the updates need to occur to bring the existing statutes into the digital age?
The reason the Privacy Bill of Rights appeals to me is because some businesses, and I am very business friendly. I always say privacy isn't anti-business, it's pro-choice. Smaller businesses, startups may not realize that they can't do whatever they want with their customers' information. There are limitations placed on them that FIPS, Fair Information Practices, impose, privacy by design. So if they can familiarize themselves with the privacy landscape, what is this about? The reason a Privacy Bill of Rights may be useful to them, because what would you have in a Privacy Bill of Rights? You would lead with the individual is in control. As I mentioned earlier, there's this term called informational self-determination, which the Germans enshrined as a right in their constitution in 1983. It says it's the individual who gets to determine the fate of his or her personal information. So if you had a Bill of Rights, it would say that very clearly to a business. You can't do whatever you want with the information. You tell your customer why you want that information from them. You limit your use of the information to that purpose. End of story. And you tell your customer, what are your information gathering practices? What are you going to do with that? You tell them, I'm not going to make any secondary use of it without coming to you for your consent for any additional purposes. You give your customer total transparency in terms of what you're doing. You give your customer a right of access to their data. And I always tell businesses, you want to do that. It's in your best interest because you want accurate data. It's got to be up to date. It's got to be accurate. The only person who knows that 100% is the individual to whom the data relates. So you want your customers to access their data and tell you, no, you got this wrong, or you got it out of context. Context is key to privacy. So yes, it may be a Bill of Rights for consumers, for users, but it will also benefit businesses because it will save them the regulatory burden of any infractions of the law that they weren't aware of because they thought they could do whatever they want with the data. There's this term, monetization of the data flows that are going to result from data analytics and big data. That really scares me. It scares me because if you're applying that to personally identifiable data, you as the business, you're going to get into a boatload of trouble. If you're applying it to non-personal data, of course, do whatever you want with it. You can do wonderful things. But if it's personal information, you have to involve the customer, the user. And when you do that, you will save yourself so much heartache and resources, class action lawsuits from data breaches. Just think of it as a win-win, positive sum, not a zero-sum paradigm.
Okay, thank you so much for the talk.
My pleasure, Alex.
All right, so that was Dr. Anne Cavoukian, Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario, Canada. You can see more at privacybydesign.ca.
Very good.
All right,
you
thanks
got
so
it.
much.
My pleasure.